All right, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining today's session on embedding sustainable procurement. My name is Wendy Carradine. I'm the operations manager for the US Supply Chain Sustainability School. We're joined today by Josh Jacobs, who's going to be giving our presentation on sustainable procurement. I'm just going to go through a couple of quick housekeeping things, and then I'm going to hand it over to Josh. But just a few things. Today's session is being recorded. The slides in the recording are going to be sent around to all of you after the event. If you do have any questions, please use the chat function. We will be keeping cameras and mics off for today's session, but would very much encourage you to use the chat. Tell us where you are joining from today, if you have any questions or comments or anything that you want to share with the group, please do make use of that function. I will be circulating a feedback survey at the end of today as well. If you could just take a few moments, really helps us out in terms of not only the content, but the format of these training sessions. We run dozens of these every quarter across the UK and the US. So we really do rely on your feedback. It's very, very valuable to us. So thank you in advance for that. With all of that said, like I said, we've got Josh Jacobs from WAP Sustainability for today's session. We're thrilled to have him back. It's always a pleasure to hear Josh speak. So without any further ado, I'm going to hand it over to Josh.
Thanks, Wendy. And I think that survey tool is the only reason I ever get to come back. So yeah, make sure to fill that out. A lot of great sessions here at the Supply Chain Sustainability School. Let me share my screen. Wendy, how am I doing?
Looks good to me.
Looks good. Okay.
Yeah, feel free
And
to give
yes,
us a thumbs up, you guys.
yeah, and definitely drop any questions into the Q&A or the chat function. Wendy will stop me. Wendy knows me well enough that I don't really have a train of thought, so this isn't a like save all your questions till the end. Ask them in the middle, and I'll hopefully be able to get to them. So yeah, we're going to get to embedding sustainable procurement today. My name is Josh Jacobs. I'm Manager and Director of Buildings and Policy here at WAP Sustainability, very recently a part of SLR Consulting. So that's me. Again, Wendy kind of went over this, rules of the game, how we're doing. Would love for feedback as well. And again, make this interactive as possible. We've got about 50 slides today. Obviously, these will be available. So take notes, listen, but again, try and be interactive with it. It certainly makes it a more interesting session. And if I don't have the answers, hopefully we'll be able to figure it out over time and get you an answer back as Wendy's got your contact information. We're going to go over what is sustainable procurement, kind of what are the fundamentals there, what are the policies and strategies, what are our enablers for that, and the procurement process specifically, and how to embed, again, sustainable procurement just into regular procurement. What we're looking for is to get you definitions, the terminology around all this. What are the drivers behind some of the sustainable procurement? A lot of this session is going to lean on ISO 20400. That's actually how I came to the Supply Chain Sustainability School, originally out of the UK, the OG Supply Chain Sustainability School, even though we have one here running in the US and a number of others around the world. The Honorable Sean McCarthy and Sean was the head of the UK delegation for ISO, the development of ISO 20400, and I was the head of the US delegation for ISO 20400. And we, along with dozens and dozens of others from around the world, helped develop this important standard around sustainable procurement that ended up not being a standard, sort of became more of a guide on how to do things. So an important thing we'll go over today. And then requests, understanding how to ask for this stuff and different concepts to bring into it. The one thing I really want you to come out of all this with is sustainable procurement isn't really any different than just regular procurement. Regular procurement, you're asking someone to provide something to you that meets certain requirements that you've asked for. These just happen to be new or potentially different requirements than you've asked for before. You're not creating an entire new procurement system. You're having different metrics to measure. You're having different metrics to track and understand and potentially go out and get some expertise in to help you build. But it's not a different procurement process. I'm not going to sit here and tell you how to reconfigure your entire procurement system because you don't need to. What you need is these concepts. Again, the idea of what is sustainable procurement, it's procurement with something along the environmental, social, or economic concept brought in. Obviously, economic is always there, right? We always talk about the economics kind of side of things. Occasionally, you'll hear this referred to as ESG, although lately ESG has kind of been, put in a specific way that hasn't always shown it in the best light. But that economic can also be part of a triple bottom line, right? Where you're looking at the environmental impact, the degradation of our outdoor environment, the social impact, which is, slave labor and wanting to treat your employees correctly and folks in your supply chain and those that are around your facilities. And then economic is we need to make sure that our governance structure of our organizations and of our procurement and our sales are economically viable. Typically people get very freaked out by this part of the triple bottom line. When they hear economic, they're like, Josh, you're supposed to be this tree hugger, right? You're supposed to be this person that, talks about saving the planet and all these different sort of things. Why are you bringing in money? Well, you can't be an organization, never mind a sustainable organization, if you don't make one more dollar than you put out every single year. We're not governments where we get to, print money and things of that nature and borrow money time after time to help us increase our budgets. We actually have to make sure our budgets are set and that we're making money. So economics has to be brought into the conversation. I mentioned ISO 20400. We defined in ISO 20400 what sustainable procurement was. And what we came up with as a consensus group took a little from the Sustainable Development Goals, the SDGs developed by the UN, and a number of other areas where we said, look, sustainable procurement per the ISO 20400 guide/standard is procurement that has the most positive environmental, social, and economic impacts on a whole life basis, right? This doesn't mean that it has to all be positive. But if you truly wanted to be the most sustainable, you don't purchase anything else, but that's not how the world works. We need businesses to run, people need to procure things, to build buildings, to continue to have things run the way that we'd like them to. So you must procure things, but we want them to have the most potential positive environmental, social, and economic impacts. And again, that whole life basis is incredibly important. Again, you can't just look at that first idea. Some organizations are like, hey, we have just recycled content and we're thinking about recycled content. That's great. But what does that mean over time? Does it degrade the product or potentially or anything like that? You need to look at it on a whole life basis. So there are 7 principles that are defined in ISO 20400, and they kind of go across the triple bottom line concepts. It's got organizational governance, talking about having clear policies and procedures to help implement and improve sustainable procurement practices. Again, we'll get into each of these a little bit as we go, but you want to truly look at the concept of how bought in is the organization on sustainability. Obviously, you have a procurement practice and how you go about procurement. So hopefully those procedures and structures are in place, but how bought in is your organization on the sustainability aspects? Some of those are human rights. You want to obviously make sure that humans in your supply chain, in your actual organization, around your company that are impacted by your company are treated fairly. Fair labor practices, mitigating any child labor, avoiding discrimination at all costs. Again, fair labor practices, safe and fair working conditions is important. Sufficient salaries and focus on health and safety. What are the environmental circumstances? Again, in your procurement process, how can you potentially improve the sustainability of your supply chain? Or by improving your sustainability, are you able to push that back through your supply chain and have the environment be thought of throughout? Fair operating practices, again, transparent and ethical behavior in your supply chains. Yes, you may not have any child labor, but is there potential child labor in your supply chain somewhere? Do you ask your suppliers to hopefully keep you abreast of what's going on, to set consistent goals and requirements of their supply chain? Any consumer issues, right? Greater awareness and promotion of ethical sourcing, making sure that obviously there's consumer feedback and things of that nature. That's part of the principles of sustainable procurement, and encouraging your surrounding community. How is local sourcing and developing potential infrastructure around you? How can it be made more sustainable moving forward? Again, these are principles. Obviously, not everything is going to live up to these concepts, but they're good places to start. They're good bones to be able to build off of. And again, it truly does sort of start with that organizational governance. How bought in is the organization on sustainability, and then potentially being able to bring some of these other ideas. And again, a lot of these ideas also in certain countries have laws built around them, certain labor practices, human rights, consumer issues, things of that nature that have to be met in order to run the organization. So again, ISO 20400 is ISO guidance standard. I've said it a couple different times where I'm like, oh, it's a standard, but it's not really a standard, but it sort of is. And again, it was started as a consensus standard, and then we realized, okay, this isn't something that you can truly certify to. I know there are organizations out there at the moment that had certification schemes around them. Those of us that were directly involved in ISO 20400 development wanted it to be guidance for organizations. And with that thought, it wanted to provide that understanding of overall sustainable procurement. What sustainability impacts are there? What are the considerations for dropping them into your procurement activity? And how do you bring sustainability into your procurement policy, procurement strategy, your organizational and your procurement processes? And again, it had to be practical, right? ISO 20400 certainly started with lofty goals, as we mentioned, as a standard, certify your entire organization to this. What we got to was a practicality concept where we said, here's how to implement this over time. We want people on a continuum, right? Not every organization is going to be able to come in and be a rock star at sustainable procurement. You have to start somewhere, get on the continuum, and then make continual improvements along that continuum. It can apply to any organization, regardless of sector, size, location, public, private. Stakeholders can get involved that are impacted by procurement decisions and processes, including your supply chain. It talks about how to pull your supply chain into your processes as well. This is also not meant to replace legislation or any governmental policy or ethical frameworks that are regulated procurement, that regulate procurement activities within your authority having jurisdiction or on a global basis that you have to follow. With all that in mind, we do have ISO 20400.org. It is a volunteer, not-for-profit website that collects stories and resources, articles and case studies, and some learnings from other past supply chain sustainability schools around ISO 20400 and the implementation of such. Sean McCarthy's organization, Action Sustainability, who also obviously has a big hand in the Supply Chain Sustainability School, helps support the ISO 20400.org. I was also involved in its launch and a little bit in some of the content on there as well, if you want to go check it out. I'll also mention this at the end of the session as well. So within ISO 20400, we also have the principles concept, where we talk about, it's again this continuum of, you want to start with fundamentals, those principles that we talked about, core subjects, considerations, drivers, what you need to build everything off of. And then you build your policy and strategy, having leadership accountability and aligning with your organizational goals that you have. How do you implement it and understand your supply chains? And then how do you get enablers involved, right? Establishing grievance mechanisms with your supply chain, enabling your internal people Engaging external stakeholders, people in your supply chain, your customers, understanding what they're looking at, actually setting priorities that enable you to do sustainable procurement, and measuring and improving performance. And that leads to the procurement process, actually implementing the individual procurement process, reviewing what's happening, selecting your suppliers, managing that contract. And then you see these always go back to the beginning. It's a very iterative process. As anyone knows who's been involved in procurement over the years, it's not linear, right? It's not we're going to put out a spec, we're going to put out a purchase requirement, and then all of a sudden it just happens and everything's wonderful and it's just works seamlessly, and you send money and they send products and you send money and they send products. There's all sorts of steps in the middle, and it should always be updated. Same with sustainability, especially with sustainable attributes, concepts, and scientific ideas being updated all the time. We want to continually bring that knowledge back into the system to keep improving it. So under those fundamentals, drivers, what is driving an organization to procure sustainability, right? Why are you as an organization going after this? What priorities in the sustainability sector do you have as an organization? These are things that need to be asked, right? This first of the four fundamentals is really important to understand yourself. I always think about, when you hear people talk about going to a therapist, or, you see it portrayed on TV, they always talk about know thyself. Well, you as an organization need to know yourself. Why are you doing this, right? What is happening to truly get at these concepts, right? And again, these fundamentals, when you talk about them, are these ideas of principles, drivers, core subjects, and key considerations. So again, these ideas, they sound like these big overarching things, but then when you drill down into the individual concepts, they truly start to make sense of, well, we have these about ourselves as an organization. Now we need just to think about them with a little extra layer on them, right? Your principles are, you act ethically. Do you have full and fair opportunities? Obviously, you respect the rule of law and international norms of behavior. We hope everyone on here, and respect for human rights. And again, analysis of costs. This is another thing you see here where you need to understand cost needs to be parts of these conversations. Your drivers of why you're doing this, why your principles are being developed. Principles can be internally developed, but they also have these external drivers. The customer expectations. Do you want a competitive advantage? Is there legislation on the horizon, or is there active legislation today? You want to minimize risk or manage risk. Potentially you have investors out there in the marketplace that are asking you to do this. Your workers, we know from many, many studies, Harvard's done a number of them as well, that the youth coming into our workforce today is asking for more sustainability from their own organizations, not just their dollars that they're spending in the marketplace, but their own companies that they work for. They want more and more. And then again, your own organizational ethics, right? They're driving your principles of being developed and things of that nature. The core subjects we touched on, right? The fair operating practice, the organizational governance, the human rights, labor practices. These things are core fundamentals that have to be part of every discussion. And then the key consideration, again, is setting your priorities. And typically that is around managing risk and opportunity. I think now at this moment, we're understanding the potential risks on a global basis. We've, 6 years ago at this time, we were dealing with COVID, and COVID had shut down the world. But more importantly, it really impacted supply chain. Here in the US, I don't know about you, but my wife still has significant PTSD around toilet paper. We always have to have 2 giant packages of toilet paper in the house because of what happened 6 years ago. And that has a lot to do with consumer buying, but also the supply chains, managing risk and opportunity, obviously for you folks on a much larger level than toilet paper in my home, but understanding the risks and potentials of climate risk to your supply chains, potential conflict risks to different supply chains and things of that nature. And how do you folks do due diligence in that, right? And avoid complicity in certain actions that may not meet your principles, that could end up, impacting some of the drivers out there. And then how do you bring your influence as an organization to it? Most of the time, the obvious answer on influence is money. I hate to say it, but it's the truth, right? Is how much money are we able to influence something by purchasing? I try to explain to people all the time that we forget how much influence we have when you're the customer, right? We're literally talking about procurement today. I don't care what size organization, even if you buy 1/1,000,000th of something that someone is selling, you still have some influence. It may not be a lot. It may not completely change what they're doing. But if you ask an organization for something and enough of their buyers ask for something, they're going to start listening. I see it all the time in sustainability specifically. Organizations have been asking, for example, for more environmental product declarations from manufacturers of building material. So more and more manufacturers have been producing those in the marketplace because that transparency around embodied carbon is being asked for. So those drivers we talked about, here's a little larger, more filled out list, was around the idea of customers and responding to their expectations. How do you come up with a better competitive advantage? Are you showing you're innovative, right? Are you wanting to be innovative? Do you need your supply chain to become more innovative with you so that you can reach your goals that you're looking for? Again, legislation and public policy at the moment is kind of all over the map. We've had years of federal legislation here in the US be incredibly sustainably focused. We've had years where the sustainable procurement requirements have been, shut down, but that just means most of the time that local procurement, for example, the state of California, the state of New York, municipalities like Austin, Texas, and Denver, Colorado, and others step up and replace some of that federal legislation that's been put in place. Again, risk management, hugely important here. I just mentioned some of the, yes, the financial loss of understanding your supply chain and that climate risk that comes with, floods, natural disasters. Again, some of the conflicts on a global basis that are impact us nowadays. Again, things like COVID. But what happens to your reputation when you can't meet your customers' expectations? That's a risk management that you need to think of. Again, security of supply chain plays right into that. Investor confidence, your own workers, again, attracting and retaining good, motivated staff by being more sustainable. Cost optimizations we've talked about. Having that overall life cycle costing and whole life cost analysis as part of your procurement and sustainability. It's typically a more advanced concept, but once you start doing it, you start understanding this is just a new way of doing some accounting. You hire accountants to understand your books. This is just a different level of understanding of some different metrics within your book. And again, that organizational ethics, incredibly important. That driver legislation, I did want to bring up, there's 9 individual states have what are called buy clean laws. These are laws where they're looking at lower carbon procurement for certain products. There's actually going to be a couple more that drop into this. Illinois Department of Transportation, Wisconsin Department of Transportation, Kentucky Department of Transportation are going to be dropping in here where they have procurement requirements. It's not necessarily a law, but there are requirements around procuring low carbon material for their departments of transportation. The state of New York has it specifically on concrete and steel, but not an overarching law specifically for everywhere. New York City has one. But the other important one is extended producer responsibility, or EPR laws. There are 41 individual states now that have some form of an extended producer responsibility law. These laws are requiring that manufacturers support the recycling of their products. For example, Oregon producers, residential and commercial packaging now have to understand the life cycle impact of their product so that they start to fund a producer responsibility organization for taking back some of that plastics packaging to make sure that it's taken back and recycled correctly. This is, a driver, yes, but it's also a risk. You need to understand, are there fines involved in some of these, and how do we go about mitigating that as an organization and dealing with it? Risk management, it's pretty good segue for someone who created these slides. Again, we were talking about the risk, but the supply chain, transportation, and routing, the location of where you are, the financial investments, the insurance concepts. There are organizations in the insurance business that are now looking to potentially lower rates if you take climate risk into account, like when you're citing certain locations like your facilities and things of that nature. Climate risk management, there's entire standards now built around climate risk management. TCFD was one that has been utilized actually in some legislation, both in the state of California and in the state of New York, and other proposed legislation in the state of Illinois and the state of Colorado around climate risk management and understanding that driver for you as an organization. So what about your organizations, right? What drives your need to embed sustainability into your supply chain, right? We've had a number of those fundamentals that come back to us, but think about it. For you as an organization, what's driving your need to do this, right? Is it your customers are asking? Is it because you want to raise your pricing? Is it because you have legislation that's needed to be implemented in parts that you sell? Why are you doing this? Once you understand that, it helps you bring that more aligned with your organizational goals and makes this an easier internal push to be able to get this done. So again, going back to those principles, right? We talked about the fundamental side, the things that are going to help us there, the principles, the core subjects, the consideration, and the drivers. But now we need to think a little bit further, kind of on policy and strategy about how you're going to adopt these principles and fundamentals into your organization. How are you going to adapt your policy into a procurement context, right? How are you going to take these sustainability concepts and put them into procurement, right? Are you folks interested in human rights? Are you interested in fair pay wages? Are you interested in the greenhouse gases being impacted by your procurement, right? Are you interested in getting to quote unquote net zero? Net zero is a statement that we hear a lot of organizations making. Is that your organization that is trying to make that? So along with policy and strategy, you want to ensure that they reflect the risks and opportunities you've identified, but also your culture and your values, right? Again, I keep coming back to this, that you can't have this be outside the bounds of who you are as an organization, or it's going to be, dropping a black dye into a clear glass of water, right? It's going to be blatantly clear that it just doesn't fit and it's not working for you. So you want your organization, you want to start with stuff that aligns with your organization. You want to start by also understanding your supply chains today, what they're doing. You don't want to ask your suppliers for something that's so off base that they can't even meet, that you won't be able to, bring that back in, have some early wins. And you want your leadership to have some accountability, right? You want leadership to be bought in because it aligns with organizational goals, and you want who is going to be accountable for this. Ideally, someone at the C-suite level, someone at the executive level is going to be able to take accountability, as this is something that they're standing behind. Managing that implementation, you want what are called SMART goals. I would guess most people have heard of SMART by now, the SMART goal concept. It means they're specific, they're measurable, they're attainable, they're relevant, and they're time-based. Normally, this has been brought up when you're making annual goals as a person at an organization having a review or something like that. That's where I've heard it previously, but it makes a lot of sense in sustainable procurement, right? You want specific goals that you're looking to go get. We would like 20% recycled content. I know one organization that is talking about they want 75% of the mechanical equipment they buy to have environmental product declarations by the end of 2026. right? That's specific. It's also measurable. You're going to be able to understand how much did we buy, how much per cost, and they're doing it by cost, had this environmental product declaration. Is it attainable? This organization did some research and said, hey, last year we were at like 35% and we didn't even know it. Like we didn't even try. So they're basically looking to try and double that. Is it relevant? Yes, this organization is trying to hit net zero goals eventually. So it's relevant to them, and it's time-based by the end of 2026, right? And what that does is it allows you to not only have a goal, it allows you to have that governing concept about procurement, right? You are telling people what you're going to do, and you're going to be able to go back to them with specifics, right? Here's our goal. We're going to be able to measure. We're going to tell you, what went well, what didn't go well, and we're going to tell you why it's relevant to us. You're also able to put that in front of stakeholders and really start to talk to them about it. Some leadership and accountability is there are lots of different requirements in the built environment around showing leadership and accountability, holding yourself to something outside. Architects and designers have the AIA 2030 commitment, which is about reducing environmental impact. The Structural Engineering Institute has SE 2050, which is trying to lower embodied carbon. Obviously, the World Green Building Council has advancing to net zero. Rocky Mountain Institute, or RMI, has Home Builders Can, their Carbon Action Network. MEP 2040 is mechanical equipment engineers and mechanical equipment and mechanical, electrical, plumbing equipment manufacturers trying to meet lower carbon requirements. And C40 for cities is about climate leadership at major municipalities, authorities having jurisdictions around the world. Most organizations have something in their realm that they could step into to show more leadership, show more accountability, and hold themselves to something. One organization, for example, Gensler, a very large architecture firm, set out and did the Gensler Product Sustainability Standards, where they have a number of products here on the left-hand side you see, where they're saying, look, worst comes to worst, if a owner or operator that we're working for doesn't have requirements, these are specifications for these products that we're going to set for environmental. They're setting environmental impacts such as the amount of recycled content. Does something have an environmental product declaration? Is something low emitting from a VOC emissions perspective? And they've identified their top 18 and they're adding to this list over time. The most commonly used construction products, and they're setting individual sustainability requirements for each of them as they bring them into their project. Now, does this mean that every single project that Gensler work on is going to have these things? No, they work for clients, and some clients are like, I just want this and I want to be the lowest cost. But Gensler is going to continue to put these in front of people because they know they have a number of suppliers that can meet their requirements that they've laid out. They're also public. If you look up Gensler Product Sustainability Standard, you'll see they're actually on their second version, and they're developing their third version as we speak. So with that, what policies can illustrate your commitment to sustainable procurement? Right? Are there something in your industry that you can point to and say, hey, this is something that we could get behind? Maybe it's just, we're going to build a LEED building next year. We're going to occupy a LEED operation and maintenance building. We're going to implement operational practices that are more sustainable, and we're going to base them off LEED or something like that. There's Green Globe certification or BREEAM certification as well for buildings. Things of that nature. What are you going to hold yourself to and commit to for sustainable procurement? So again, we've touched on the fundamentals and the policy and the strategy. Now we need to think about the enablers, right? And the enablers are the governance and leadership that you have at your organization. How are you being enabled by your leadership to set your priorities, right? When you're setting these, you need to ensure that they're reflecting identified risks and opportunities like we talked about before. You don't want to just charge in not understanding what's happening. Again, you want to embed it in concepts that your organization is already behind, right? Your culture, your values, you want to make sure that you're there because that helps with staff engagement, right? You want to have that engagement with your staff. You want them to understand why you're doing this, your procurement staff, obviously, specifically, but leadership also. Why are we implementing sustainable procurement? Well, we've got these parts of our organization. We have drivers, and you've laid it out for them. You also want to engage your suppliers and understand how this impacts them. And you bring them along with you so that it's not just you pulling the wagon. Hopefully they're also able to help you. And you'll be shocked, a lot of, hopefully you wouldn't be shocked. There are a lot of organizations, suppliers now in the building product marketplace that have sustainability concepts because they've been getting asked for it for a number of years. So some of your suppliers may even be further ahead than you are in the sustainable supply conversation. So again, the enablers, we've talked about some of these, right? But the enablers to be able to do this are having a governing procurement overarching concept, right? Again, if you have procurement requirements, a governance structure over your procurement requirements already, sustainability should set right in there. And again, that's with setting priorities, right? Being able to bring those priorities in for certain individual products. Our number 1 through number 3 sellers, we want to implement a number of this amount of recycled content, right? And make it that SMART goal we talked about. You want to enable people, like have people inside your organization, leaders of categories of procurement, have them bring back sustainable ideas for you. That enables them to be bought more into all of this. You want to engage your supply chain. Measure and improve performance. This isn't just about sustainable procurement, it's all procurement. And to be fair, it's for everything. We should not just set goals and then be like, yeah, okay, great, who knows what happened to them. But we want to measure and improve that performance as we go. And again, establishing a grievance mechanism with your supply chain. I know sometimes this is a little bit of a question mark, but having suppliers be engaged with you, having your customers be engaged with you, potentially coming back as one of those stakeholders, helps you understand more what's needed next. So that engaging stakeholders, this slide here with the graphic is about doing what's called a charrette, where you're getting a number of different stakeholders together. It's very common in the, not very common, it is more common in the building marketplace, or an architect designer will get together the owner, the operator, the occupants, the engineering firm, any interior designers, the city, potentially the code official, and get them all together and say, okay, we want to build this building. Let's have a conversation about what's happening. What's the sustainability concepts? What's the common language we want to use around sustainability? You see here, we talk about what food do we want, and there's pizza over here on the side, and how many chairs and how many tables. When you're talking about feeding people, well, it's the same in your procurement, right? You want to know what your customers are asking for. You want to know what your supply chain can do. You want to know what your own operational team can create. If you have engineers or designers and leadership, you want them to sit down and come up with these concepts together. The great thing is enabling people, you're part of that now, right? Supply Chain Sustainability School has a number of great sessions like this one. I'm sorry, I blanked on sessions there for a second. That probably brings my session a little bit into question here at the moment. Apologies. But a video recording such as this, they also have short animated sessions as well. They also have things that you can read on there. Again, the Supply Chain Sustainability School is a great way to get people enabled to understand what you're talking about as you go. There's different concepts also. Certain individual municipalities, authorities having jurisdictions. This one is the New Jersey low embodied carbon concrete requirement, right? You get up to 8% tax credit incentive for concrete producers who overperform state established standards on embodied carbon. There's 5% bid discounts for exceeding set concrete GWP limits. And by exceeding, we mean getting better than, and then getting discounts also for bids with carbon capture or utilization and storage. These are things that your people can find and start to bring back and say, hey, if we do this, we are able to be a more attractive product because we're going to help someone with their tax requirements. requirements, or we're going to improve our own tax credits. These are things that people within your organization, category owners, can start to find and understand and potentially even get involved with when they're out in the community and in engaging with the stakeholders. So who are the stakeholders and champions in your company, right? Is it going to be the head of procurement that's going to champion this? Is it going to be the chief financial officer? Is it the CEO? Is it one individual category person that's going to start and say, I'm going to make my area the sustainability leader at this company? But then understand, who are your partners in this, right? Who are your suppliers? Who are your customers who are also in on this with you together? So setting priorities is obviously an incredibly important concept in all of this, right? You want to set things that you can start to find wins in and then build out. What you have on the screen right now is something called greenhouse gas emissions. You have scope 1, which is basically the calculation of any on-site fuel combustion. If you have on-site generators and things of that nature, if you're running a fleet of trucks on your to move your stuff around, that's scope 1. Scope 2 is electricity purchased from the grid, turning lights on and off. These calculations are done by many organizations on the planet. Most public traded organizations have these scope 1 and 2. There's also certain legislation in California and New York now, and multiple other states have proposed. Greenhouse gas accounting is a requirement for certain level organizations, of certain size organizations. And then scope 3 is everything else, all that other upstream and downstream activities, meaning your purchased goods and services that you're bringing in, right? So this procurement concept, but then also when you sell your goods to the outside world, what's happening and do they get disposed of? These can help you heat map, right? They can help you go in and understand where your hot spots are for us. Do we, are our facilities that we're using incredibly inefficient? Is our scope 2 incredibly high? Are we not looking at the embodied impacts of the goods that we're purchasing in our procurement? Can we make a difference here, right? These priorities can help you understand how the sustainable procurement can help across all these areas of greenhouse gas emissions. Refining the process, as we talked about, is an obvious one, right? You're engaging your stakeholders, you're measuring those SMART goals that you've established, you're establishing that grievance mechanism, and it's iterative. Again, it's always going back in and of itself. You're going to learn from your stakeholders. Obviously, your customers are going to be speaking to you with their dollars. You're going to be speaking to your suppliers with your dollars, but you want them involved. Again, it sounds very weird sometimes that like you want to go to the people that you're purchasing from, but push them a little bit if you feel they need to be pushed. We want to continue to work with you, but we're setting this goal for ourselves. Can you set it with us? I also know there are organizations that we've worked with organizations that have been asked to meet certain sustainability requirements simply to continue to supply. And they've been given a year and they either get there or they don't. And these organizations have had to meet climate risk requirements and greenhouse gas accounting requirements, or as I mentioned before, develop environmental product declarations for their products. So again, we've kind of stepped through here, right? Where we've done the fundamentals, the policy and strategy and the enablers. And again, some of these keep going back. When you're in sometimes of the enabler, that brings you back to fundamentals of what you're doing. But now let's talk about the procurement process itself and actually delivering on this concept, right? This is the last pillar of the ISO 20400 standard. It's the actual procurement process. The great thing is when we were developing 20400, we had actual procurement professionals sitting at the table with us. It wasn't just us sustainability tree huggers sitting around saying what we could do. We had actual sustainability experts from associations and individual organizations sitting with us, global organizations who were saying, hey, we've done some of this, or we know how to do procurement. Let's bring our minds together. And again, none of these procurement considerations are really that different from regular, except the middle one, right? You're always reviewing and learning with your procurement. You're always planning. You're selecting your suppliers. You're managing the contract that's going on. But okay, how do we integrate sustainability into the specifications, right? Integrating is just incorporating those requirements that we've talked about before, right? That where you're setting priorities. Okay, how do we drop those into our specifications, right? It's just one more thing to add in a requirement, right? In your planning, is it part of a design specification? Is it part of surveying your suppliers? Can you get supplier letters? Do you need to educate and provide resources to your suppliers? The Supply Chain Sustainability School is one way that happens, right? Where I know there are a number of organizations who are members of the Supply Chain Sustainability School that have now sent out the Supply Chain Sustainability School resources to their suppliers so that they can get more educated. You want to update your RFPs, and then you want to bring in any additional analysis you need to understand, again, your customer requests, your supplier chain information, and potentially the design specifications that either you're developing or that are in the marketplace that you're trying to respond to. So integrating sustainability requirements doesn't have to be you on your own, right? It doesn't mean you have to write up your own kind of concept. What can happen is you can utilize these certifications that are in the marketplace. Some of them are over here on the right. You have Green Guard, which is about product emissions. You've got level certification for business and institutional furniture manufacturers, which talks about overarching, so circularity kind of concept of sustainability in a institutional furniture. You have Cradle to Cradle, which is probably the most stringent of the overarching sustainability certifications on the planet. That program actually makes you meet certain sustainability requirements for your organization, for your facility that the product is developing, and for the product itself. And you need to improve year over year as you keep the certification. So these are performance requirements in specifications. So very much like you would quote a code or a standard that, you know, an NSF or UL or ASTM standard in the marketplace, or an ISO standard for that matter, that would list, hey, our product meets this. You can use some of these certification programs in the marketplace as long as they have some of the requirements and functional and performance requirements that you're looking for, that you've decided to implement in your sustainability. Use them, and part of your job is done. You don't have to make up these requirements on your own. There are experts out there that have done it. Now, probably the most important part of procurement is selecting the right suppliers, right? Writing out your request for qualifications, asking organizations. These are the issuance of requirements out there, right? You're going to say to people, hey, we're going to be changing this when we send out our RFPs. We want to make sure that your products are going to have this. Sometimes you get information back where you're learning that, hey, the marketplace doesn't have this information. Only one or two of the organizations you want to procure from have this information. Then you're actually going to write your RFP. We want proposals around this. I've seen interesting lately, a couple of organizations have started to say, we're going to be requiring this within a year. We'd like you to start now. That's almost a pre-RFP. It's that request for qualification where we're going to be doing this in a year. We're going to give you a year to get this, but we'd love for you to start as soon as possible. Again, any pre-qualifications that you're looking for from organizations, you know, how are they going to prove this to you, right? How are they going to show that the profile that they've been evaluated? Again, do they meet any of these certifications? Do their products meet any of these certifications that you're asking for? You're going to get bids from them just like you do in a normal process. Again, how are they going to prove that they're meeting? And then project requirements. Again, for if you're doing a specific building or a build out of some, how are you going to meet the individual owner project requirements that are in the marketplace? Managing the contract. This isn't something I probably need to tell anyone on here if you've been involved in procurement. You want to have pre-bid meetings. You want to do interviews. You want to procure the procurement plans prior to actually hitting the button and making sure that you're getting what you've asked for, not some version of what you've asked for. You need to verify that the purchases meet the individual specifications that you've asked for. And then review and learn. Again, I can't say this enough. We've said it on multiple slides. It's an iterative process. You want to continue to learn, get better, go back, work with your suppliers. It's not a you against them. I know sometimes it feels that way, I'm sure, in the marketplace, but it's you and them working together to make the best product that you can to sell to your customers. And remembering you're their customer and working with them to get them better along with you. So where are you going to start in sustainable procurement, right? Is it finding out your organizational priorities? Is it trying to align? Is it understanding what you do today in sustainable procurement? Is it picking up ISO 20400? Is it going to ISO 20400.org to understand where you fit into the marketplace, right? And seeing where you are. The final concept, as we talked about, is that refining of the process. The reviewing and learning, again, I know I just said it a couple slides ago, but it's the most important part. You're not going to be experts right away. You're going to want to manage those contracts and continue to improve, push people to improve what they're doing sustainably, if that's what your organization is looking for. The other thing here, and I haven't put it directly on the slide, obviously this is being recorded, but is borrow. Some people say, just steal. There are concepts out there in the marketplace. There are specifications. I know MEP 2040, for example. I am a steering committee member of MEP 2040, and we have example specifications that we allow people to download for free, right? Go on there, sign up, download for free. And you can use those specifications to purchase looking for mechanical, electrical, and plumbing equipment with embodied carbon information within them, right? You see someone else using something, talk to fellow colleagues in other organizations. You may not be able to directly take their specifications, but talk to them, find out what they're doing, work together and borrow concepts that others are doing. So we're coming to the end of the session. Hopefully be able to answer any questions that you have. I know it's a lot of information in just under an hour. But the flexibility in this approach is that, again, that iterative concept, right? Can you start absolutely anywhere? Of course you can. You can talk about who you have suppliers today and try and, figure out what sustainability aspects they have today. Write sustainability concepts into your specifications so you can show people what you're doing instead of just, trying to start from scratch. You could start with, again, the fundamentals, that understanding your own organization's principles and the core subjects, which is incredibly important. Understand who your drivers are. Could you figure out on your team who are people that are interested in sustainability and have them in the categories that they work on? Hey, go find out what is in the sustainable discussion for your specific category, for concrete, for flooring, for steel, for, again, furniture, for paint, whatever it is. Have them go out into the marketplace and come back and present to you some information about what's important. So I've mentioned a couple times some of the relevant resources. ISO 20400.org, free website. Go check it out, obviously, along with everything on here. I'll get to this in a second. But ISO 20400.org has a lot of case studies about 20400 being utilized by organizations to improve their sustainable procurement. Obviously, you're going to want to go to ISO to download 20400 if you'd like to read directly from the standard. On ISO 20400.org, you actually have a self-assessment tool about where you are. Again, it's not a grade. It's literally sitting there and looking in the mirror and being like, hey, we have a chance to take this next step. Hey, we're close on enabling people. Where are we on our governing procurement and things of that nature? It's a pretty interesting tool to see where you are in the process so far. Again, Supply Chain Sustainability School, supplychainschool.com. You've got a lot of topics up here. I recognize a lot of these things that are on the screen today. Some of these are from the UK. You actually see the Embedding Sustainable Procurement right here. So happy that we're going to be at that 60 minutes and hopefully get everyone in on that. But lots of different things. There's the e-learning modules, which are shorter, individual, little animated processes. And then there's longer presentations and things of that nature that happen all the time. I think we even had 2 today, Wendy, if I remember.
That's correct. Yeah.
Yeah, so we've had a couple today, and those are available online at the Supply Chain Sustainability School. My name's Josh Jacobs. Heck of a lot of information in a short period of time. Good thing is that's why this is recorded. I'll certainly take any questions, and please would love you guys to share your feedback. Wendy, did we get any questions?
Don't see any questions in the chat. I'll give everyone just a few more moments before we wrap up. But I will highlight a resource that I think you guys might actually find very useful, and Josh helpfully put it up on the screenshot just before, was the heat mapping e-learning module. So heat mapping is an excellent tool to use in this journey for embedding sustainable procurement. Yeah, it's a 30-minute module, and it can help you take you through that process, gives you handy templates. So I'm going to include that in the wrap-up email that goes out to everybody either this afternoon or tomorrow morning. Yeah, not seeing any questions, but if you do have any questions that pop into your head afterwards, just reach out to us, and we'll make sure that I will make sure that Josh gets your question, and we can hopefully sort you out. So.